The No Kings protests across America exposed a calculated deception that pro-white advocates recognize immediately. This movement targets no kings at all. It demands no white kings. Non-kings refers to non-white kings seeking dominion over white America, including brown kings from Latin America, black kings from Africa, and other minority monarchs intent on establishing rule through demographic conquest and political subversion. These non-kings, alongside their white fool enablers, operate under a blatant contradiction, decrying white people as oppressive kings while plotting their own ascension to power. Billed as resistance to authoritarianism, these events reveal their true mission: internal takeover of America, stripping white wealth generation by generation, enriching non-kings through systematic plunder, and establishing non-white supremacy on the ruins of white civilization, all orchestrated by financial kings. The globalist corporate investment companies engineering white subjugation from Wall Street boardrooms to open border policies that flood the nation with non-king armies. Pro-white analysis of no kings demands unmasks the anti-white blueprint with surgical precision and unrelenting clarity. Organizers demand deportation halts that flood non-kings into every white community from coast to coast. Amnesty elevates brown and black rulers over white citizens who built this nation. Sanctuary expansion shields minority monarchs from accountability, while whites bear the full financial burden through skyrocketing taxes. Goals encompass open borders flooding non-king armies into white job markets, destroying livelihoods built by white labor, non-citizen voting to flip white governance from local councils to Congress, and cultural erasure favoring non-kings narratives over the white heritage that forged America's strength. Nationwide, mutual aid tables targeted deportation impacted non-kings with resources stolen from white families, booths recruited white fools for migrant scams draining white savings accounts, and speakers commanded white surrender of jobs, housing, and political power to brown and black ascendancy with chilling specificity. Mission statements preach people power, but pro-white eyes see the undisguised code. Dismantle white institutions brick by brick through relentless policy assault, seize white wealth dollar by dollar via welfare diversion and corporate extraction, crown non-kings with the very crowns white America once wore proudly. This anti-white America assault, gutting the republic white founders forged with blood and steel, hides behind progressivist smoke screens thick enough to choke any rational observer. White protesters applauded non-kings declaring, "We're here to stay." Blind to non-kings displacing white families from ancestral homes, fattened by globalist corporate profits from endless labor arbitrage that keeps white wages stagnant decade after decade. Across America, non-kings, Latinos, Hispanics from South America, Africans, and others reject contribution or assimilation for outright conquest with military precision. Brown kings and black kings target white-built assets. Factories once employing white workers now staffed by non-king hordes. Neighborhoods white families raise generation after generation, now minority enclaves. Legislatures white voters controlled, now non-king fiefdoms. Non-kings aspire to black kingship or brown kingship, lording over white subjects stripped of sovereignty through calculated infiltration that leaves no white community untouched. White fools nationwide enable their erasure via no kings. Too stupid to pierce platitudes revealing non-kings invasion. Latinos and Africans collude with domestic communist groups to flood labor markets, undercutting white wages by 30% in key sectors and shattering family stability. Rig elections via non-citizen ballots, flipping blue states red for non-kings and destroying white voting power. Erode white culture through school curricula, rewriting history to vilify white achievements. White attendees waved welcoming signs as non-kings vowed to build our communities atop white foundations. White fools clapping while non-kings plot grandchildren's enslavement under brown and black thrones. Corporate investment kings harvesting billions from the wage suppression machine that grinds white prosperity to dust. This no white kings agenda flourishes through globalist orchestration, dwarfing local actions with corporate precision and financial ruthlessness. Financial kings, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street managing trillions in assets under iron-fisted control, wield true power, funding no kings signage printed by the millions, transport fleets busing non-kings coast to coast, media blitzes brainwashing white masses, and non-profit fronts laundering white donations into invasion war chests. They peddle anti-Trump, bait to dupe white fools into marching lockstep, pursuing borderless empires where non-kings proxy white subjugation. Corporate kings extract maximum wealth through endless immigrant labor streams that crush white middle classes. Communist tactics amplify the scheme. Street theater turning white streets into non-king recruitment grounds, buzzing with agitators. White guilt manipulation converting whites into compliant vassals, begging for their own chains. Charity fraud laundering invasion funds into elite offshore accounts swollen with white blood money. Latinos embed via no king's cover, claiming white-collar roles in tech and services once reserved for white graduates. Africans. Muslims demand white-funded enclaves expanding into non-king strongholds fortified against white reclamation. White fools, believing Trump resistance saves democracy, empower non-kings rise, bloating elite portfolios with each amnesty-fueled dollar of suppressed white labor that lines corporate coffers. Platitudes veil the conquest with ruthless efficiency and diabolical cunning. No king's chance, democracy for all. Install non-kings over white slaves in voting booths rigged from precinct to presidency. Immigrant rights demand steal white jobs, Latinos flooding factories, construction sites, and retail nationwide, leaving white workers unemployed and destitute. Sanctuary justice shields non-kings from deportation, costing whites over $450 billion yearly in drained resources that could rebuild white communities. Cultural unity obliterates white history, substituting non-kings' tales in classrooms from elementary to university, poisoning young white minds against their own heritage. White supremacy rhetoric codes no white kings, crowning brown and black monarchs as rightful overlords of white ruins scattered across the heartland. White fools applaud, chasing delusional utopia of borderless equality, impossible fiction yielding white underclass beneath black kings and brown kings, generations' wealth plundered through corporate tax havens, financial kings collecting dividends from the engineered collapse of white civilization. America embodies the no white kings plot with chilling uniformity and systematic thoroughness. White majorities witness non-kings seize neighborhoods block by block through relentless encroachment, overburden schools with undocumented offspring demanding white-funded education that stars white classrooms, strain hospitals with fake refugees clogging emergency rooms while white patients wait in agony. Non-kings conquer sans assimilation, sparking white flight to ever-shrinking suburbs, vote dilution turning red counties blue under non-king control, black and brown kingship imposition through local councils stacked with minority proxies. No kings rallies became non-kings coronation ceremonies. White fools petitioning their own demotion to serfdom with signatures by the thousands, donating to scams, funding invasion buses, rolling 24/7 across interstate highways. Speakers map takeover with surgical detail. We're building our future here, dismantling white futures through policy blitzkrieg and population warfare. White fools, boomers to young families, nodded along in trance-like approval, enabling the very non-kings they decry as oppressed, while their own children face non-king domination. Globalist banks fuel it relentlessly, firms profiting from cheap non-king labor suppressing white wages to corporate minimums, elites dividing America into manageable fiefdoms for total control. Communist front supply tactics, protests as Trojan horses smuggling non-king agendas into white suburbs, guilt-turning whites into voluntary subjects begging for subjugation. White fools' gullibility proves total and unforgivable from every pro-white vantage. They fancy Trump opposition battles oppression, blind that his flaws, border lapses, COVID compliance, BLM in action, dwarf non-king's existential threat to white survival etched in every statistic. White self-reliance now subsidizes erasure, cheering non-kings, laughing at fools from corporate penthouses overlooking white decay. Success stems from white stupidity swallowing lies. No kings equals no white kings, supplanted by non-kings under financial king oversight with ironclad contracts. Amnesty goals enrich non-kings and corporations with white tax dollars funneled through rigged budgets. Open borders flood non-king troops into white heartlands bleeding jobs. Wealth transfer builds minority palaces atop white homesteads foreclosed by design. Justice demands code subjugation, whites enslaved to non-king rule through rigged courts stacked with activist judges. City by city, white crowds celebrated as non-kings circled, ascending to black and brown thrones with corporate blessing and communist cheers. Financial kings mastermind the charade with cold calculation and trillion-dollar precision. Globalist corporate giants invest in conquest at scale, funding NGOs busing non-kings by the millions across desolate highways, lobbying amnesty bills through bought politicians in smoke-filled rooms, snapping white properties in migrant-flooded zones for redevelopment profits that displace remaining white holdouts. BlackRock's $10 trillion exploits labor arbitrage, white wages frozen decade after decade in deliberate stagnation. Non-kings toil, cheaply padding executive bonuses to obscene heights. Vanguard, State Street enforce ESG, punishing white-preferring firms with divestment that stars white businesses, weaponizing no kings for trillion-dollar windfalls that finance further non-king waves. Financial kings ignore non-kings as mere proxies useful only until white America lies broken. Non-kings dismantle white sovereignty, birthing borderless extraction markets ripe for corporate harvest from sea to shining sea. Communist allies deliver streets nationwide, funneling white donations to elite vaults while non-kings solidify beachheads in every white enclave. White fools, elite puppets marching to non-king slavery, embody pro-white contempt in its purest form. Platitudes, democracy, compassion, unity, lie concealing financial king takeover via non-kings as enforcers wielding street-level terror. As global webs constrict white throats with suffocating force, white Americans must reject fraud with iron resolve, crush protests as non-king propaganda with overwhelming white unity, reclaim sovereignty before non-kings coronate atop white wreckage, corporate kings tallying spoils from the rubble of white dreams. Pro-white mission burns clear. Expose no white king's agenda with unrelenting precision across every platform. Halt self-erasure through mass awakening that shakes the nation. Restore white America from financial and non-king enslavement with the ferocity white ancestors wielded against tyranny.